The Atlantic is black glass. 200 feet down, the steel hull shudders as the first depth charge detonates, a hammer blow that buckles light fixtures and fills the air with falling rust. Red emergency lanterns swing. Somewhere above, the hunter's active sonar pings, sharp, relentless, searching for steel. The captain whispers one order: take her through the thermocline. Below that invisible cold boundary, sound itself will bend and break into darkness where no ping can follow. Welcome to deep war. By the late summer of 1942, the Battle of the Atlantic had become a war of hunger measured in tonnage and graves. Germany's Type IXC U-boats were the wolves of the gray wastes between Iceland and Newfoundland. 67 meters of riveted pressure hull driven by twin diesels, lethal when surfaced, desperately vulnerable when forced deep. Against them, the Royal Navy had tightened its screen. A single merchant convoy now sailed within a bristling guard of escorts, among them the lean black swan sloops, hulls painted in pale disruptive gray, their sterns laden with racks and throwers that could pattern the sea with depth charges. These escorts carried a new kind of ear. ASDIC, the early active sonar, sent sharp pulses into the depths and listened for the echo off steel. When it found a hull, the ping returned hard and bright. Yet the ocean itself kept a secret. 100 meters down, where sun-warmed surface water met the crushing polar current rising from the abyss, temperature collapsed over a few meters. That boundary, the thermocline, was invisible to the eye, but absolute to sound. Acoustic waves bent as they crossed it, refracted and scattered, carving a shadow zone below where even the sharpest ping dissolved into silence. For a skilled submariner, that shadow was not merely oceanography, it was sanctuary, or a grave, if he misjudged it by a single degree. She had been stalking the convoy since dusk, running low on the surface with diesels throttled back until their exhaust was a faint tremor against the wind. Rain hammered the bridge in cold sheets. The watch officer, oilskin streaming, counted masts through salt-burned binoculars. 19 merchants, 3 escorts dancing on the flanks, their wakes glowing faintly with phosphorescence. In the conning tower, the captain pressed his forehead to the wet steel and calculated intercept and trim, feeling how the boat sat heavy with fuel and torpedoes. At 2200 hours, he ordered the dive. Vents hissed as ballast, tanks flooded, the bow dipping beneath the black water with a long, sighing rush. Inside, the control room contracted into its familiar hell of damp steel and red light. Condensation ran down miles of piping. Men moved shoulder to shoulder between valve wheels and brass gauges, boots slipping on wet deck plates. The sonar operator clamped his black bakelite headset tighter, eyes closed, breathing shallow, listening to the sea resolve itself into layers of sound. Above, the convoy's screws churned a broad, ragged thunder. To port, the nearest escort's propeller beat a sharper, faster rhythm, propellers cavitating as she turned. The captain brought her to periscope depth. The lens broke the surface amid rolling troughs, streaming water, then cleared. A giant freighter filled the crosshairs, her hull high and heavy laden, escorts blurred beyond in spray. The solution was whispered. Bearing, angle on the bow, range 1100 meters. The order came soft. Tube 1, Tube 2, fire. Compressed air slammed. 2 wheels left the bow with a hard shudder that rippled through the hull. In the control room, the crew counted heartbeats. A minute passed. Then 2 columns of white water should have risen against that freighter's side. Nothing rose. The torpedoes had run deep or been chewed by the sea, their wakes lost in the convoy's churn. And in that failure, the U-boat betrayed herself. A lookout on the freighter screamed and fired a red flare. An escort's searchlight snapped on, a hard white blade cutting the rain. Then the ping came. It was not the dull, searching pulse they had heard before. It was a sharp, metallic strike, active sonar locked, ringing off the pressure hull like a bell struck inside the skull. The sonar operator tore one earpiece away and hissed that they were held, direct echo, bearing constant. On the surface, the black swan turned hard toward them, bow wave rising, screws thrashing into cavitation roar. The captain slammed the periscope down and ordered full dive, rudder hard to port, all planes down. The first pattern fell within 90 seconds. Depth charges rolled from stern racks and throwers, turning slowly as they sank, their hydrostatic pistols ticking. The explosions were not distant floods. They were instantaneous hammers that lifted the entire boat and slammed men into steel. Light fixtures shattered. A high-pressure line burst and sprayed scalding mist. The hull plate screeched under sudden overpressure, rivets groaning. Dust and rust snowed from overhead. Somewhere aft a man screamed and was silenced as if muffled by water. Second pattern, closer. The red lanterns swung wildly, painting faces in streaks of blood and shadow. The escort above never stopped pinging, each pulse now brighter as the range closed, searching for the exact depth at which to set the next charges to kill. The captain knew he could not outrun that sound in open water. His only chance lay beneath them, where the ocean bent sound itself. He ordered depth 60 meters, then 70, watching the depth gauge needle creep past marks where the hull's groaning deepened to a low, mournful protest. The chief reported trim heavy, ballast struggling, screws barely turning to keep cavitation to a whisper. The sonar operator, sweat running into his collar, whispered that the water was cooling rapidly around the hull. The thermometer dropped 3 degrees in as many meters. They were entering it. The thermocline hit like passing through a cold veil. Outside the pressure hull, the shimmering boundary diffused light and swallowed sound. The active ping from above, moments ago razor sharp, suddenly smeared and faded, refracted sideways along the thermal gradient, scattering into the abyss instead of punching through. Inside, the boat slipped into an acoustic shadow where the surface world seemed to dissolve into muffled distance. The captain ordered all stop, silent running, every pump and fan secured. Men froze with hands held in midair, afraid the clink of a wrench might carry. For a long minute, there was only the slow creak of steel under pressure and the ragged breathing of 40 men trying not to breathe at all. Above, the escort's screws prowled, still searching, but her pings now slid harmlessly over the invisible roof. Another pattern of depth charges fell, but it fell shallow, detonating well above the thermocline in a dull, distant rolling that barely rocked the boat. The shadow held. In that narrow layer of cold, absolute darkness, the U-boat had vanished. To understand what saved her, you must understand that sound in the sea does not travel straight. It bows to temperature, to pressure, to salinity, as light bows through glass. Warm surface water carries sound quickly. Cold, deep water slows it. When a sonar pulse strikes the thermocline, that abrupt thermal gradient, physics forces it to refract, bending sharply away from the colder medium as if glancing off an invisible ceiling. Below the layer, a shadow zone opens, a wedge of water into which surface sound cannot directly enter. A submarine that slips beneath it does not become invisible in any absolute sense. She becomes acoustically displaced, her echo smeared, attenuated, and scattered until the surface operator hears only diffuse reverberation where there should be hard steel. That protection exacts a price that can break a hull long before an enemy does. Every 10 meters of depth adds another atmosphere of crushing pressure against the pressure hull. At 70 meters, the Type IXC plates already screeched and oil-canned under load. At her theoretical crush depth, near 230 meters, mild steel yields and weld seams tear. An implosion follows in a fraction of a second, so violent it leaves no wreck to find, only debris raining through darkness. The captain who sought the thermocline flirted with that boundary on every dive, balancing trim against negative buoyancy with exquisite precision in ballast and compensating tanks. Survival also demanded absolute acoustic discipline. Cavitation, the eruption of vacuum bubbles from a propeller turning too fast, was a white scream on any passive sonar. Even with screws stilled, a dropped spanner, a cough, a pump left running could betray the boat. Silent running was not merely throttling back. It was a ritual of stillness, men holding breath while the boat hung neutrally buoyant in the cold layer, suspended between the hunters above and the abyss below, kept alive by the same physics that sought to drown them, and waiting for the surface screws to fade astern before she dared breathe again. When the escort screws finally faded astern and the sea above fell quiet, the captain ordered a slow, agonizing ascent back through the cold veil. Planes eased, ballast blown in careful sips until light filters returned. Many boats that sought that sanctuary never returned at all. Some misjudged trim and sank through the layer into darkness from which no blow could recover them. Some were held on the edge of the shadow until air ran foul and carbon dioxide dimmed men's minds, until a cough or a failing gasket gave their hull away and the next pattern found its mark. Their iron coffins rest now where sonar still cannot easily reach, on cold slopes beyond the thermocline, Hulls collapsed or scattered in fragments, crews sealed in steel with no grave but pressure. Yet the lesson endured. Allied anti-submarine doctrine learned that a thermocline was not a quirk to be noted in oceanographic tables, but a battlefield in itself. Escort commanders were taught to hunt with towed variable depth sonars that could dip beneath the layer. Submariners were taught to seek it as reflex, to vanish into temperature as a fighter vanishes into cloud. The Atlantic keeps that boundary still, night after night, invisible, indifferent, a cold horizon hung in mid-water where sound fractures and steel must choose between the hunter above and the abyss below. Listen, and you can almost hear them yet, suspended in absolute silence, waiting for a ping that never comes.